So my piece is inspired by two collage artists, two visual collage artists who make films. One Cassandra C. Jones, and the second one Christian Marplay. So, is it play? Oh yeah, play. So, I guess it's. Can you see that?
Sparkle horse.
So yeah, this is Sparkle Horse animation. So this piece is called After Muybridge, and he's the one that showed. I can't remember that the horse's feet are all up at one point in time, or all down at one point by taking pictures. So she went through like 5,000 images and found 12 images that closely matched Muybridge's 12 and linked them together to create this running horse made from found footage, essentially. So I really like that idea of creating something so cohesive and so like beautiful and having such continuity with found images. So I thought that was so elegant. So that is my first inspiration. I don't know how elegant this piece will be, but I'll be using it. Okay. Oh yeah, that's a different inspiration. Okay, so here.
You too.
Moving on. Okay, so let's not get that. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Do you want the volume off?
Okay.
Seriously, guys, no horsing around, please.
Okay. So my second inspiration is Christian Marplay's film collage, The Clock, which you may have seen recently at the SF MoMA. It's made from thousands of scenes from movies that reference time, and the film is 24 hours long, and it's synchronized to show the actual time. So we're just going to watch. This is probably bootlegged, and I know this copyright's not right, sorry. But we're going to watch this for about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to explain what I did. I created a literary collage of the passage of time, albeit on a much smaller scale. I collected 350 passages of reference time from 81 different books, but I'm only going to read you actually 32 passages from 24 books, and I arranged them chronologically and then edited select passages together. When I was reading about making the clock, I learned that, curiously, no movie clips were to be found in Bollywood movies, which was curious. And in my literature search, I discovered certain quirky things, like time references were more prevalent in mystery and detective stories, and also in books with characters that had Asperger's or autistic qualities. I love the combination of the two. So the curious incident to the dog in the nighttime is a detective story with a main character who describes himself as a mathematician with some behavioral difficulties. Contemporary writers like Murakami and David Foster Wallace also tended to frequently reference time, and particularly time not rounded off to the nearest hour. And Stephen King, it turns out, is a good source for references on quarters of the hour, so that was interesting. The selection I'll be reading spans a period of time from 6:30 a.m. to 6:40 p.m. And like I said, 24 different books I'm referencing, and I'll be reading 32 different passages. And when I'm reading, I'd love for you to think about time as a character and not get too caught up in other details, because it's not quite as elegant as Cassandra C. Jones's piece, where it just flows. But let's say it does flow. Let's see what happens. And then afterwards, I can read you some of the different sources that I done from. So let's see. Okay, the methadone addict began laughing so hard that she dropped the binoculars for the edit house upstairs fire escape when they were watching at 6:30 hours, and the binoculars fell and hit the roof. Fell and hit the roof of one of the edit house counselor's cars right below the little roadlet with a ringing clunk just as they were pulling in. The counselor, his name was Calvin Thrust, and he was 4 years sober and a former New York porn actor. He was gone by 7:30. For an hour she lay in bed, letting the stove and the sun work on the cabin's chill. When she got up in her dressing gown and assaulted the disorder, made up the cots, washed the dishes, swept the floor. It was morning now, just 7:45. Bill had hung the phone up 5 minutes ago. "Bill, you can't just leave, you know that." "I have to," he said. There was a hutch on the far side of the room. He went to it, took a bottle of Glenfiddich. At 8 o'clock, Arthur didn't feel so good. He woke up bleary, got up, wandered blearily around his room, opened a window, saw a bulldozer, found his slippers, and stomped off to the bathroom to wash. At 8:30, Mr. Dursley picked up his briefcase, packed Mrs. Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal on the walls. His eyes were everywhere. He had the secret police at out Stasi the Stasi. They kept watch on everyone, even those everyones who lived in the States. A security apparatus so ridiculously mongoose that you could say a bad thing about El Jefe at 8:40 in the morning, and before the clock struck 10, you'd be in the Correnta, having a cattle prod shoved up your ass. He stood up once, early on, to lock his office door, and then he was reading the last page, and it was exactly 10:12 a.m. The sun beating down on his office windows was a different sun from the one he'd always known. It was a yellowy, mean star in some strange, forsaken corner of the galaxy, and his own head was no less altered by the interstellar distance he traversed. He carried the manuscript out of his office and past Lolita. She'd long since taken off her turquoise bracelets and stacked them on the table, moving them here and there as we talked, like a player at an Ouija board. "I hope it all goes super with Paul," she said, smiling. The hall clock chimes 10:30. I look around as though a closer timepiece might be handy, but I've known almost the exact minute for an hour. At 10:33, the rain stopped. It didn't taper off. It swished all at once, as if someone up there had flicked a toggle switch. "It's 11:15, Gary said, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Before I leave, here's a summary. Dad is demented and incontinent. Mom can't have him in the house without a lot of help. Crocodile is obviously not an option, and so what I want to know is what you're going to do. Now, Mother, I want to know now." Mr. Radley walked to town at 11:30 every morning and came back. sometimes carrying a brown paper bag that the neighborhood assumed contained the family groceries. By Chip's watch, it was 11:35. Julia was wearing a shapeless lavender raincoat and holding a DreamWorks tote bag. Her hair, which was long and the color of dark chocolate, was big with humidity and rain. In the tone of a person being friendly to large animals, she said hi to Alfred and hi separately to Enid. Win or lose, what's important is the spirit of this beautiful game. So if you have time, at lunchtime, 12:30, please join me and your colleagues for a good, healthy time in the Physical Education Center. You'll feel better about yourself and the worries of life will melt away. At 1 o'clock, we head for the square. Attendance is mandatory unless you are on death's door. This evening, officials will come around and check to see if this is the case. If not, you'll be imprisoned. Mother had keys to the house and we went in and she said hello, but there was no one there because it was 1:23 p.m. and I was frightened, but Mother said I would be safe. So I went up to my room and closed the door. I took Toby out of my pocket and I let him run around and I played Minesweeper. I'd been cutting up some caper or other. I think I was trying to crawl up the chimney as I had seen a little sweep do a few days previous. And my stepmother, who somehow or other was all the time whipping me or sending me to bed supperless, my mother dragged me by the legs out of the chimney and packed me off to bed. That was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the longest day of the year. At the same time, 2 p.m., police nabbed Oliver O'Shaughnessy, 52, of the Hotel Seaboard, West 49th Street, as he exited from a Hamburg Heaven, Madison Avenue. A clock with big red hands reads 2:15, and the boys hooted at him as they chased him all around the room, with wet spots on his pants. They hooted and called him bladder baby, bladder baby, bladder baby. I watched the clock, electric and round, at the front of the green blackboard. 2:30 comes during testifying. Aunt Helena is here, as well as Aunt Lydia, because testifying is special. I squeezed lemons over the oysters and ate them in clockwise order, the Bruckner Romantic on the background. The giant wall clock reads 3:05, the dial supporting 2 lions which spun around the mainspring. Bruckner came to an end and the music shifted into Ravel's Bolero. I ordered a second draft. Beverly Marsh had shown up around 3 o'clock, wearing faded jeans and toting a very old Daisy air rifle that had lost most of its pop. Everything was somehow right that day, so blue and green. I knew the sun shone because my ignition key was reflected in the windshield, and I knew it was exactly 3:30 because the nurse who came to massage Miss Opposite every afternoon was tripping down the narrow sidewalk in her white stockings and shoes. At 4 o'clock, feeling his heart pounding, Levin got out of the cab at the zoological garden and walked down the path toward the sledding hills and the skating rink, knowing for certain that he would find her there because he had seen her at Sherbatsky's carriage at the entrance. But come 4:15 and still no sign of him, a desperate Samad had chewed every fingernail he possessed to the cuticle and collapsed on the counter, nose squished up against the hot glass where the battered burgers were kept eye to eye with a postcard showing 8 different local charms of County Antrim. At 4:30 that afternoon, Irene Nesser took a taxi to the airport, where she went into the ladies' room and cut up Monica Scholl's passport into little pieces, flushing them down the toilet. The credit card she also cut up and put the bits in 5 different rubbish bins, and the scissors too. Next day at 5 o'clock, she married Tom Buchanan without so much as a shiver. That night was dedicated to her sighs and my whispers. We finally fell asleep just as the sun rose over the Vladek housing projects. An exhausted American flag slapped itself in a summer wind. We awoke at 5 p.m. At 5:33 p.m., there was a blast of 2 deep resonant notes, a major third apart. At 6 o'clock, the buzzer rang. The boys were there, downstairs. I didn't answer it. It rang again. Still, I did not answer it. I did not know how many times it rang or how long he leaned on it. I let it ring. At some point, I walked the length of the living room to the balcony. He says there is another recurring nightmare about a clock with hands frozen eternally at 18:30. That's so trouser-fouling scary, he won't even burden Green's fragile psychology with explicits of it. And then it was 6:35 p.m., and I heard Father come home in his van, and I moved the bed against the door so he couldn't get in.
And he came into the house, and he and Mother shouted at each other. And Father shouted, "How the fuck did you get in here?" And Mother shouted, "This is my house too, in case you've forgotten." So when the attaché does get home, at like 1840, his spacious Boston apartments are empty, the living room lights undimmed, dinner unheated, and the attachable tray still in the dishwasher. And worst, of course, no entertainment cartridges. Thanks. And I'm just going to read through the list of books I referenced. Infinite Jest, which begins and ends with Infinite Jest. Angle of Repose, It by Stephen King. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Harry Potter, The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. A couple of John Franzen novels. Independence Day. To Kill a Mockingbird. Super Sad True Love Story. The Hunger Games. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. Moby Dick. Breakfast at Tiffany's. Einstein's Dreams. The Handmaid's Tale. Hard-Boiled Wonderland. Lolita. Anna Karenina. White Teeth. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The Great Gatsby. And I think that's it.